All right, welcome to Your Best Life blog. I'm so happy to have Michael Gregory here today. Michael is the founder of Mindfulness Meditation Centers since 2000. He's the executive director of Beyond Therapy. He's a former monk. He studied Buddhism in Thailand, Burma, Tibet, Sikkim, and he's taught countless meditation retreats, counsels clients around the globe. He's just an incredible man and great meditation teacher, and has he's actually my personal teacher as well, and has taught me everything I know about Buddhism and meditation and how to live your best life. So as you know, this is Your Best Life blog, and what we're all about is things that you can put in action today to create a better life and to just feel more happy and fulfilled and peaceful. And what a great guest Michael is to help share those ideas with you. So welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you, Eric. Nice to see you.
So I have a quote of the day. So each time we do Your Best Life, we have a quote of the day, and it's something that I pulled from your Facebook feed.
Okay.
Be kind to unkind people. They
Yeah.
need it the most. And Ashley Brilliant said that originally. So I just wanted to start out maybe with your story. You know, why are you so passionate about meditation and Buddhism? And maybe how did you come to it? You know, I know your background was a stockbroker or you know, that kind of real, you know, fast-paced New York City lifestyle, former life. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, you know, what brought you to Buddhism and meditation, and why has it become such an important part of your life?
I think the background is one that I think not a very happy one. I'm an only child. My father he was murdered when I was just before my 8th birthday, and my mother, she left for work, and I didn't see much of her, and grew up, I think, fairly angry, fairly, I think, upset is fair to say, and explored philosophy, explored religion in depth. Went for college when I was 15 or 16, and went right into philosophy and immersed myself in it, trying all the while really trying to make sense of my life, my world, what mattered, what was meaningful, what wasn't, and that was my life. There was no, you know, it was very always a search for meaning as long as I could remember. You know, what was important, what mattered, and really a lot of the things, consequently, I think that passes normal family or social conditioning to me seemed very superfluous. The things that other people seemed interested in, making lots of money, becoming famous or well known, already seemed didn't have much luster. I'll put it that way. And mostly through relationships, through coincidence, I ended up in investment banking, and got to find out exactly what I already had surmised. I ended up making quite a bit of money early on. Had my fair share of women, my fair share of drugs, and pretty fast lifestyle living in New York. And by the time I was 27, suicidal, gun in my mouth, pile of cocaine next to me, and but on my bookshelf were things that I were really interested in, and I'd had a very good intellectual understanding of, or at least I thought I had a good intellectual understanding of. Lots of Buddhist books, Dalai Lama books in front of me, a lot of spiritual books, things that were conceptually very interesting, and I had done some meditation up to that point, and had really done a considerable amount as a teenager, but it more or less lost my way by the time I reached my 20s and was into my career. And by the time I was 27, already probably too much money, too many women, too many fast times, and really thought that this, and everyone kept telling me, complimenting me on how successful I was. And looked like, I think from a certain point of view, that things were going pretty well, but I wasn't feeling it. I wasn't feeling it at all, in fact. And I had basically 3 choices in that moment. And it was pull the gun out of my mouth and go back to work and just keep on keeping on, That was one option. I had the second option, which was to pull the trigger and believe to some degree that that was the end. And I think I wasn't quite sure that that was true. I don't know that the material end is the end. I certainly do not accept that now. And the third option was to get out of my conceptual understanding of philosophy, of religion, of spirituality, and see if there was actually experientially something deeper to be discovered. And I'm very happy I did that. And so I left for many years. I was a monk for about 4.5 years and spent another 3 or 4 years in deep meditation retreat. Have spent at least several months a year in retreat since then, every year of my life, some of which you have participated in with me. And that's been the mainstay. Why I do what I do. It saved my life. It has saved probably hundreds, if not more than that, other people's lives, and changed their lives for the ones who've I've had the great fortune to run across. They've affected me. I've affected them. The path has affected them. And I get about 600-700 emails a day that are not junk, that I'm not able to filter through, but the ones I do are filled with people I've met over the years for the last 2 decades, expressing their gratitude and thanks for the path, for the teachings, the instructors, instructions that they've received from me through everything I've done has been through my teachers, and it's been a beautiful life, and since that terrible day. And I'm grateful for it. Grateful for our community. Grateful for the students, people I do counseling with each day. Everything that has provided me with an opportunity to continue growing and developing. So I'm grateful not just for you, but for everyone in our community and far beyond my teachers. It's been an incredible experience, and hopefully there's many more years to go.
Great. Thanks for sharing all that so honestly and openly. I think a lot of the people who will watch this may not have as tough experiences, or maybe they do. How can meditation help with daily anxiety or depression? And I know that runs a gamut from, like you said, to a point of complete discontent with your life and suicide. Just that sense of dis-ease that you might have going into a meeting that you might have at work. How does meditation help with all that?
It depends. I mean, there's thousands of different types of meditations. The ones that I focus on with my therapy clients are different than what we do in retreat. What I focus on with my counseling clients, mostly about how to manage their lives better, their families, their jobs, their own emotions. Mm-hmm. So if you take a look at it, that type of meditation, that's called mindfulness, and it's probably the biggest thing going right now in psychotherapy. It's probably the biggest movement in psychotherapy and corporate wellness. It's enormous. It's been unfortunately terribly appropriated from the Buddhist tradition to simply help people to learn how to stress less within a life that they've carved out for themselves. So we do teach that, but essentially when it comes to anxiety, I think one of the most important things is to understand and how meditation can work with it. Specifically, mindfulness meditation is quite simple. If you look at the dictionary definition of anxiety, you'll see that it's worrying about the future in catastrophic ways. What if I don't have enough money? What if I'm not able to retire? What if my family falls apart? What if I lose my job? What if my health declines? These are extremely common concerns. And if you take a look at the time context of that concern, it's always the future. Anxiety is always a futuristic emotion. Mm-hmm. And what meditation does is it brings you back to recognizing something, that what is actually taking place in the present moment. And this is precisely what mindfulness hones in on, is that you are actually right here in this present moment time context. You're exactly here and you're nowhere else. And it's only your thinking. You're thinking about the future, which isn't taking place and can never really take place. You're always squarely right here. And meditation helps you to release not just the content of your thoughts about worrying about the future, but also understanding the time context itself, that there is no point in worrying about a time context that isn't actually happening. And this is the time context that people are taking medications for, seeing therapists for. So this is why this is such a revolution in therapy and counseling, but at least for the anxiety piece that you asked about. And the anxiety piece is always in a time context that isn't taking place and can never take place. It's taking place specifically within your own thinking, and that's it. So we teach you how to soften your relationship to thinking, not buy into your own thoughts and the content of your thoughts, worrying. It's just about coming back home. And where you are when I say coming back home is right here, right now. And that has such a higher rate of success in treating anxiety than any type of anxiety medication available.
So what are a few things that people could do if they're driving in their car right now, listening online or watching the video, something they can take advantage of today to get out of that future thinking and worry or worried about the past, to get present? Are there any things that are accessible like that?
In a very simple, elegant way, just placing your hand on your abdomen, feeling your abdomen rise and fall with each inhalation and exhalation, that's present moment. And really honing in on that and also wanting to, with the intention of not wanting to be anywhere else than where you are, which is right here, right now. Just breathing in and breathing out. And everything else is superfluous to that experience. Mm-hmm. All thinking is past and future oriented. Think, if you were to consider just how much thinking is about right here, right now, how much?
Very little.
Very little. Yeah, you have about 20 to 30,000 thoughts a day on average, most of which, if I were to ask anyone, what is your intention to have those thoughts? How many did you mean, of those 20 to 30,000 per day, how many did you mean to have? And you'll see that almost everyone answers less than 5%. And so you can see what it is you're worrying about. You didn't even mean to even be thinking about. It just arises superfluously in the background of your mind. And what we're learning how to do is simply by, in the most elegant way possible, simply place your hand on your abdomen, creating the immediate present sense of tactile sensations, feeling your belly rise and fall, come and go, each inhalation, each exhalation, and just staying with that, even for a few minutes. Now, what's happening from a neuroscience perspective when you're having anxiety, for example, that's the back part of your brain. You've got on either side of your brain hemisphere, it's called the amygdala. It's a little walnut-sized organ on either side of your brain hemisphere. And when there's anxiety, that's your fight and flight response. Fight, flight, and freeze response. And when there is anxiety, that's what's taking place. There's lots of movement in the amygdala. That governs your hypothalamus. You can feel it. You have maybe a light sweat. Your pulse goes up. You start to worry. The little lines on your face furrow at the brow, a little squishing of the temples, and you know this. And so what this does, this is called a relaxation response, and it's a very simple mechanism in which you're breathing in, breathing out, and all of a sudden on a neural imaging scan, what happens is the movement from back here, from the amygdala, all of a sudden there's hardly any movement. Just by this very simple exercise of breathing in deeply all the way down to the diaphragm, and then taking your time to exhale very slowly through the nostrils, coming right back to the time context that you're actually in, which is right now. And so that fight, flight, and freeze response, which is called an amygdala hijack, and I'll explain that in just a moment, that's what's being relieved. Is that response, simply by coming back to the present. And the best way to come back to the present is by feeling the immediacy of sensations in the body. And you're just feeling. And that is actually taking place in the present moment. So mindfulness is a synonym for presence, for being present, for having presence or being present in the moment. Mm-hmm. And that's a very simple way to come back to where you really are. And if you were to really ask yourself the simple question, if you were to come back and really be present right here, right now, and ask yourself, how much suffering are you actually experiencing right now? I mean, like right here, right now, in this moment. And you'll see that everyone answers the same way. There's almost nothing going on. All of your suffering is about a time context related to your thinking about the past and future. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's so helpful and so healthy to learn mindfulness. in particular, to really reorient you in an honest way to what's really taking place.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of people that'll watch this are really familiar with asana. They do a lot of yoga, and they focus mostly on the asana. But what I'm seeing is a shift where people are starting to get a lot more interested in meditation. I guess, do you have any advice about broadening your practice from asana? Because I've noticed when I do asana, maybe I'm a little stressed or whatever's going on. I'll do asana. I feel great afterwards for a couple hours. I mean,
Sure.
I have that buzz afterwards, and I feel like the world's great. But then it kind of fades, and I have to go take another class. And I
Sure.
found with my meditation practice, it does seem to be a little more lasting, and it's changing my life in a really positive way. So how do those two worlds come together? And what do you see happening in the West around that?
With regard to the Western practice of yoga, I think, without in any way diminishing Western yoga, because there's no point in that. I think I think everyone needs to be transparent with themselves and realize that the way that much of Western yoga is utilized has nothing to do with its several thousand-year-old history. That yoga truly is a union of body, breath, and mind. And that's how it's been represented, including our ethics, our day-to-day ethics are all included. And it's not a bunch of physical postures. And I think most yogis who've been around a little bit know that at this point. It is not about the tight clothes. It's not nothing personal, but it's not about expensive yoga wear and the mirrors and how flexible you are. That little thing that passes at the end for meditation called shavasana at the end of our practices, where people lay down for maybe 10 minutes or so, but 10 minutes at the end of a session and do some breathing. For many people, is the most relaxing part of the entire practice. And that is, it has nothing to do with the physicality of yoga. Nothing. It is literally connecting the breathing in, just as we were talking about a minute ago, connecting the breathing in and breathing out to the present moment, where your body and your breath and mind are aligned. And asana can serve in the beginnings and the foundation of our practice, can serve tremendously in that process. But as the ending, the actual ending is the union of those three things. And not just those three things, but even more. The deeper you go into your practice, the union of body, breath, mind, speech, ethics, consciousness, awareness, everything is brought into alignment, where there is, we call, not a fractured existence. And that, what's happening in the session is meant to ultimately bleed out into your post-meditation, after your yoga practice, that you don't run out of the yoga room and jump back on your cell phone and get back into busyness. The idea ultimately is that there's a blending or a mixing between the yoga period and the post-yoga period, or the meditation period and the post-meditation period, until ultimately there is no difference, that the body, breath, and mind, speech, ethics, everything is brought together at all times. Now, the way that practice is utilized both in yoga and meditation often creates two separate worlds, or a separation in our psyche, that there is this idea that there is my yoga time and then there is my post-yoga time where I go back to my busy life. Mm-hmm. And that creates a wedge, or a wedge in people's psyche, an unnecessary split, where there is this part of my life which is very relaxing and very conducive to my well-being, and then there's the other stuff where I get really busy and I go unconscious, and it's much more. It's much more than that. It's literally about a harmonizing, not a balance. And I think I hear this a lot, trying to live a more balanced life. And by balance, what a lot of people mean is I devote X amount of time for yoga, X amount of time, let's say, for meditation, X amount of time for family, X amount of time for the kids, X amount of time for me. And this is an impossible situation. Harmony means that you bring the practice into every area of your life, not devoting a certain amount of time in your life for certain things, where one aspect of my life is more conscious than another. In fact, it's the idea of becoming more conscious or more aware in every aspect of our life. And that is what we're seeking, that there is no separation. And of course, instead of having the idea of balance in your life, what we end up with is certain things from our life are put in perspective, and we no longer engage in them. We no longer engage in things that would lead to disharmony. Whether it be certain types of music or maybe certain relationships would be better distanced from.
Mm-hmm.
We're not seeking balance. What we're seeking is harmony in all areas. And certain things, as your practice deepens, certain things naturally fall away. Your change in diet happens as a natural thing. You turn increasingly toward peacefulness. You increasingly turn toward harmlessness. It happens in your diet. It happens in your relationships. And most importantly, it happens in relationship to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
No harm toward yourself.
I've heard a lot of people say when they start to meditate, so the yoga teacher will talk to them about, they'll integrate some meditation into the class, and then sometimes they'll go ahead and sign up for that meditation class they've been, wanting to take. And in that first class, what you hear a lot is I can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
There's too many thoughts, and I think people think they need to stop all their thoughts.
No, it's exactly the wrong advice. There's many different kinds of practice, and the idea that you would like to stop your thoughts is not mindfulness practice. There's a type of practice called concentration, which we would do that, but that's not where anyone would start with the concentration practice. We'd all start with the ability is not, again, it's not how many thoughts you have. In fact, I would encourage you to just have as many thoughts as possible. It doesn't really matter how many thoughts, how many emotions. That's not what not having thoughts is not the goal of meditation. That'll happen to you when you die anyway. And so we don't have to worry about a meditation period without thoughts. What we want is, and you can see this even as we're having our discussion today, is something very different. And that is in the foreground of your experience right now. If you were to place your hand on your stomach, and I invite you to do so, then you can feel the abdomen rising and falling right now. Mm-hmm. You can feel that with each inhalation, each exhalation, the abdomen's rising and falling. And then in the background, it doesn't matter how many thoughts are happening. So there's a foreground and a background of experiences taking place in awareness. And what we're doing right now is we're anchoring ourselves in the foreground of our awareness with the breathing in, breathing out, as can be experienced in the felt aspect or the somatic aspect of the body. And so right now, it doesn't matter if there are a million thoughts going on in the background. It's that you feel the rising and falling of the abdomen in the foreground of your experience. Now, it's normal, completely normal, that you will fall away from having the rising and falling movement of inhaling and exhaling in the foreground. And it's completely normal that you might instead start thinking about thoughts, stories and dramas about what remains of your day. When you catch yourself doing that, that's called mindfulness. And you can simply say to yourself at that time, thinking, if you wish, and then come back to the breath without any judgment or recrimination whatsoever. And how you come back is also important, that you don't jerk back quickly, just nice and sweetly, very gentle with yourself, that you don't judge yourself how long you've been away. Oh my God, how long was I thinking about that for? It's like, oh, I'll never be able to get it. That's just more thinking. Instead, no judgment, be called dispassionate observation. And it's a very tranquil feeling. When I say dispassionate observation, it doesn't mean that you're emotionless. It just means it actually feels quite good to come back to the breath and not be engaged in the dramas of the mind. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so there's no need for you, in conclusion of this part of our talk, there's no need for you to not think at all. Thoughts, if you take a look at them in any case, if you were to examine them under a different type of practice called insight meditation or vipassana, you would see that the content of your thoughts are endless. So you, like right now, I could ask you to bring up like an image of one of your kids, for example. Okay, so you bring up an image of your kid or a pet that you have, and then if I ask you, well, what do you have any ideas or thoughts and stories about that, about your dog, your cat, your kid? You could go on and on and on endlessly. But if I were to ask you, in terms of an insight practice, why it is we don't need to worry about thoughts, is what time context are they in? Past, future, or now? And if you were to go deeper into that, and if I were to ask you, now at night when you go to sleep, you cross over, we call it the hypnagogic plane, you go from a waking state to a sleeping state. You have just as many thoughts, just as many stories, endless. But when you wake up in the morning or you wake up in the middle of the night from one of them, you say like this to yourself, wow, that was just a what?
Just a dream.
Just a dream. And that is what you learn, that so much of life is like an illusion, like a dream, in Sanskrit called Maya. And much of what you're stressing for, what you're worrying about today, even tomorrow you won't remember, even later today you won't remember. Kind of like a dream. And certainly what happened last week, who you had difficulty with, all of it, it's like you can't even remember the details. And so we start to force the question, is it really our thinking? Going back to your question, is it really our thinking that's the problem, or is it attaching to our thinking? Not understanding that it is very much like a dream. The content is very illusory, like a mirage of the mind. And what are you actually so worried about? What are you so stressed about? And you'll see that almost all of your stress, if not all of your stress, is absolutely about not recognizing the nature of your mind, the illusion-like display of it, and how little of it actually, if you were just to recognize just that, this absolute fantasia of the mind, that there's nothing there to really stress over. You see that thoughts are not a problem. It's your understanding of the essence of a thought and attachment to those thoughts that are the problem. And so that's what we focus on when we teach, is like, why don't we just come back to what's actually taking place, which is called radical simplicity. There's just this breathing being, this being called yourself, who's just literally just breathing and fabricating one story after the next. And that's not necessary. There's no need to get involved to entertain unless it actually serves you to function. And how do you know that something is functional or dysfunctional? Would you be willing to stress for that? Would you be willing to stress for that story? And if so, then it's not functional. So you can use the illusion to serve you functionally, the illusions of your mind. And how do you know how do you know it's the opposite? That you're serving the illusion? That you're willing to suffer for your own thought processes. And that's a great litmus test to know whether the illusion is serving you, helping you to function within the family, helping you to function at work. And what does it mean, helping you to function? That instead of stress, here's your litmus test: increasing loving kindness, increasing compassion, a tranquility, a very gentle joy. And that is when you know that the illusion is serving you. Mm-hmm. And if there's stress and suffering, that's your litmus test. You're getting angry. You can keep track. I encourage all of my students to keep track every day of their scores. We call their destructive emotion scores. Anger, anxiety, guilt, and depression being primary. Just as simple as 0 to 10 every day. 10 being off the charts, 0 being non-existent. And if those scores, which are, how many, all summed up, no one's, keeping track, of your scores, only you, it's a subjective response. But it's the number of times you get angry every day, how intense the experience was. I mean, was it irritation or was it rage? That's all in the framework of anger. Anxiety, guilt, depression. How many times a day are you having that experience? How intense was it, and how long did it last? So frequency, intensity, and duration. And if your scores are above a 0 on any day, it's because you are attached to your own thinking. Mm-hmm. You're believing your stories. You're believing the mirages of your mind. Not maybe. You're definitely doing that. And that's not necessary. And that's why we learn how to practice mindfulness. You don't have to suffer. You don't have to go through this. You don't have to torture or torment yourself every day with your own thoughts. And of course, if your scores go above a 0, and I invite everyone who's listening to ask, to look at your scores every day, that anger, anxiety, guilt, and depression. And if they go above a 0, you ask yourself like this, watch, and this is how you know you're really off base. Who's to blame for those? Why? Who's to blame for your anger, your anxiety, guilt, and depression? And then if you point the finger outside of you, say, oh, this person or this situation is making me feel that way, then this practice, you can say, what is putting right in front of you is who's responsible for your emotions. So this practice is also called 100% emotional responsibility, or as I deem it in our classes and in our therapy sessions with others, we deem it emotional elegance. Because you've got to take the blame game off other people or events in the world. He made me feel that way. She made me feel, they made me, traffic made me feel this way. Red light, the traffic lights turned red. Traffic lights make me angry. So, and you'll never be happy if you're attributing emotional responsibility to someone else. And then, so that's called blamelessness. Except we missed one important part. When people stop doing that, they stop blaming other people for how they feel or situations, then they usually point the finger this way. And blamelessness means blamelessness, not just toward other people and toward events, but also toward oneself. Mm-hmm. So we usually, a practitioner, once they start taking responsibility, goes through this intermittent phase of guilt or shame. And instead, as our practice grows, we learn not to do that and learn that it's not people, but it's behaviors that are toxic. Behaviors are toxic. People are, we call pure potential, because you can always change, and you always are changing. You may not be recognizing that per se, but you are. You're changing. There's no doubt about that. Every moment, whether it be thoughts, emotions, cellular division, there's no part of you that is not shifting, and you can change. And in fact, you can direct that change consciously instead of letting it just happen to you by taking complete responsibility for your life. Mm-hmm. So that's what we work on. And that's why people do so well with us, because they actually get better. And I'm describing the process of how it is that they're getting better. By doing what? Practicing mindfulness, learning how to let the illusions of their mind come and go without attachment. And then consequently, when they start keeping score, keeping track of their emotions and asking themselves, am I serving the illusion, or is the illusion serving me? And those scores go above a zero. You ask yourself this one question: who's responsible? Who's responsible for that? Myself, others, or events in the world? And when you conclude it's not other people and it's not events, and then you go, well, maybe it's me. And they go, maybe it's just unconscious habitual behaviors, just unconscious patterns that we've learned, we've been conditioned to by birth, by family, by society, by our own confusion. Mm-hmm. And instead we look at patterns of behavior as particularly toxic. And we are the people, we are the potential who can no longer, that's what it means to say pure potential. It's not just some nice word you hear around in yoga circles about becoming your authentic self and energy and vibrations. This is not some sort of fake spiritual persona. This is actually work, and it's useful work, and it's helpful work. And what it means is just putting all the phony baloney stuff away and stop with because we have this sort of spiritual persona that takes place in meditation class and in yoga classes, where the voice drops to a nice soft voice and our eyes get really big. And we have uncomfortable eye contact, and we use certain words, aura, vibration, authentic self, genuine. Come on. Let's actually be transparent with our own being. Let's be transparent and look at those emotion scores every day. Because no amount of spiritual bypassing can hide that. Anger, anxiety, guilt, and depression for starters, jealousy being another, pride. And you can track those scores every day. And then once you get through that, then you can get into the nuance. And there's some particular ways that people disturb themselves with their own thinking, believe it or not. It is their own thinking, actually. And they don't see it. And we're really, really good at honing in on what those things are. So some examples of that are like mind reading, the belief that you think that you know what other people are thinking, or at least what their intentions are. And that disturbs people greatly. Overgeneralizing. All yogis are vegetarians, for example. Or all black people are like this. Or all people who live in predominantly white ski areas. You know how they are, right? So that's called the fallacy of overgeneralizing. All Hispanics are. All Republicans are. All Democrats are. And so you learn not just how to let thoughts come and go, but the thoughts that remain, how can we utilize them in such a way that we don't disturb ourselves anymore? So those are some prime time examples. Catastrophizing is another one. That's a disorder. It's like worrying about the future in the worst possible ways. Well, for what benefit? For what gain? The normal standard issue ways that people hurt themselves. Perfectionism is another common one, where everything has to be perfect. I look around your room right now, Eric, and I see that all of the frames, you have a Buddhist painting over there, you have an elephant painting over there, and everything is centered just right. How would you be if I came along, or how would your wife Elaine be if I came along and just moved that frame of that elephant frame over there? If I just moved it a little bit to the side, would you be okay with that?
Yeah, I think I would. I think I'll go move it right now.
Okay, let's go ahead and try that. Just a little bit off. There you go. See, now, if you were a perfectionist, if you suffered from the mental, which is a mental issue, that's not right. That's not correct. There can't be shoes in front of the door. Everything, and you go around. And that's the idea, that you don't accept reality as it is, which is the primary hindrance behind almost every destructive emotion. The lack, things should be different than they are. That is behind all anger, all irritation. So like, for example, so if you go up to that traffic light that we spoke of, and the light, just as you approach, turns red, what happens to you? What happens to your emotions? Your anger, your irritation, frustration, what happens?
Well, if you had meditated that day, you would just breathe, and it would be no big deal. But
because it isn't a big deal.
Yeah, yeah.
Because by meditating, you mean you're accustomed to letting thoughts come and go. Reality.
Oh, right. If you followed the thought, you would turn into, this red light means I'm going to be late, and then you'd have a storyline. And
yeah, but here's a really common one. Then you leave that stoplight, and you go, and just as you're about to go to the next stoplight, guess what happens? The next one turns red. And then it happens 3 in a row. You know what that means. And a lot of people they start into very weird stories, such as, the universe is trying to tell me something. I'm not supposed to make it to my appointment. Or God is trying to give me a message. Or the city planners are all screwed up. They don't know what they're doing. Why? Or my favorite, why me? Why does this always happen to, and it's like, that's all thinking. That's precisely what we mean, why you want to learn mindfulness. Because none of this makes any sense.
And those thoughts aren't the problem. It's just the following of them.
Yeah, the thoughts themselves can arise, and you can laugh at those. That could actually be humorous. If I ever have a thought like that, I'm laughing tremendously. It's literally not a big deal. Traffic lights do turn red. In fact, they do. And so there's nothing actually to consider. And any thought that arises about them is absolutely no big deal. And it's the same thing. I was on a plane flight to Colorado a couple of months ago. I was right in the middle somehow, didn't get my usual seat. And of course, right to the left of me was a very heavy set, overweight lady. And I couldn't even get the little part of my arm onto the armrest. And we're on the plane, and she's making no eye contact with me. And I start to notice something as the plane starts to move. She starts sweating. And I don't mean just like a little bit. I mean a lot. And she starts shaking a little bit. And I look at her, and I know from my background what she's going through. She's starting to have a little bit of a panic attack. She's starting to have that thing that we talked about, an amygdala hijack. Her breath, I looked at her chest, there's hardly any movement. She was holding her breath. Poor thing, she's suffering tremendously. And so I said to her, today may be your lucky day. And she couldn't even open her eyes, and she said, how's that? And I said, you happen to be sitting next to an anxiety expert. And she goes, you're kidding. I said, nope. I said, my specialty is panic attacks. And she goes, you're kidding. I said, no, I'm not. I said, you want me to help you? She says, please. So I had her put her hand on her stomach, just like we talked about. And we got out of this thing called the amygdala hijack. And the amygdala, don't forget, is the organ that's back here, that's going off, that's saying fight, flight, and freeze. Because obviously, we started talking about what's she worried about. She's worried about what's going to happen when the plane takes off. It's going to what? It's going to crash. And she's worried, right? And so she's having an amygdala hijack. And when they say amygdala hijack, the hijack means this part of your brain up here. This is called your anterior prefrontal cortex. That's your ability. That's your executive control functioning. That's your ability to reason.
Mm-hmm.
And when the amygdala, there's lots of movement in the amygdala, there's almost no movement up here in the prefrontal cortex. Her ability to reason, in other words, has been hijacked, which is funny to say when we're on a plane, right? So it's not that the plane's getting hijacked. Her ability to reason has been hijacked. Because obviously we all know statistically that there's probably not going to be any problem. It's safer to fly than it is to drive. We all know that, but many people have this issue. And over bridges, driving a car, riding in a train, the whole idea is, what if something happens? Then I'm in danger. So anyway, she's got her hand on her stomach. She's have her do a particular series of breathing exercises called a relaxation response. And all of a sudden, she starts to lighten up. And she looks at me, and she's all sweaty, and she says, she has a smile on her face. She says, "Thank you." My whole left side of my body is completely covered in her sweat. And I'm smiling. I'm not mad at all, because why? It's the same thing at the red light. If I'm sweaty, then why get mad? Reality is that what? I'm already what? Sweaty. So how does getting angry help anything? How does being disturbed by that help anything? Because I'm already what? I'm already wet. Right. And if you're at a stoplight, it's already what?
Red.
So why are you getting upset? And so we started laughing, and I said to her, "Hey, can we talk about the plane?" And she goes, "I'd rather not to. I would rather not." And I said, "Well, I think it's important that we do." And she said, "Okay. All right." She said, "You seem like you know what you're doing." I said, "I do. I do know what I'm doing." I said, "So here's the deal. What you don't want to talk about, what you want to avoid, which is normal for most people, that's just thinking." I say, it's better to confront your thoughts, because that which you avoid only gets stronger. Mm-hmm. So let's confront it. I said, "So what's your fear? The plane could go down?" And she goes, "Yeah." And I go, "Well, listen," I said, "let's be frank. Forget the statistics, because you've never been convinced by that." I go, "You know what the statistics are?" She goes, "Yeah." She goes, "That doesn't make any sense to me." Okay. I said, "Okay, no problem." I said, "But the reality is, let's just face it, either the plane stays up in the air or it doesn't. Forget the statistics. If it stays in the air, then why have anxiety? Why worry? If the plane stays in the air, why worry?" And she looks at me and she goes, "Because it could crash." I go, "But right now it's not. So why worry?" And I go, "And if it crashes," I go, "Guess what?" She goes, and she told me. So what do you think she said?
Nothing to worry about.
Right, because why?
She'll be gone anyway.
That's right. So if there's something you can do, then what? Why worry? Mm-hmm. And if there's nothing you can do, then why worry? And she started laughing on the plane. And then she tried to buy me a cocktail, but I don't drink that much. So I said no. Also, I don't need to drink. And that was my point. Because why? I'm not what? There's nothing to relax. There's nothing to calm down over.
Right.
I'm okay. See, there's a whole bunch of things at stake here. And if you ask most people why they do these things, it's because they're uncomfortable in some atmosphere, whether it be in a group of people, they're trying to be less inhibited, they're stressed. And so if everyone who's listening today would ask themselves, what are your avoidance mechanisms? What are your escape mechanisms? You'll see that most people have some unhealthy type of behavior that they turn to. Mm-hmm. And drugs, alcohol, food, watch TV, go see some sort of escaping behavior that they just, and what is it that they're not facing? And that's my question to you. They're just not facing what? Not reality, but their thoughts about reality. And so that's why we teach what we teach, is to help people to learn how to be not only less stressful, but actually to be happy by recognizing that their thoughts are ephemeral, illusion-like, that there's really nothing to do. And there's no reason to stress over your own thoughts. And in fact, as it turns out, if you were feeling stress and suffering today, and I suspect many people in your audience are, I guarantee the reason why they're doing that is because they're actually distressed unnecessarily over their own thinking.
So it's all about the thinking. So as we get to the end of the show here, I always do the same thing, the same question. It's from a friend of mine, Dave Asprey at the Bulletproof. He's another great blogger out there. What are 3 things from all your experience that people can start using today to have the best life possible? Like 3 things they can really put to work And from all your experience, even outside of the meditation world, diet, whatever it is,
Mm.
to just kind of tune into their best life.
For me, best life means a life without stress and suffering. And if you ask what are the top three things that you can do, I think take a look, first of all, at your relationship to reality, to the present. And the reality, by that I mean your present, by the present moment. Mm-hmm. And can you even go a few minutes just being present, putting your hand on your stomach, just breathing in, breathing out, and not get carried away by your thoughts. Because that's an excellent indicator, of where you are in your life. And does sitting still with your own mind, does it bother you? Does that trouble you? The whole idea of just being with your own thoughts without being distracted, how do you feel about that? So that's the first thing I would ask you to do as a test. And the second thing I would say, keep track of those scores. Every 24 hours, put it on your iPhone as an alarm, on your smartphone, mm-hmm. your Android, whatever. Anger, anxiety, guilt, and depression. So meditate every day. That's the first thing I would do. Keep track of those destructive emotion scores every single day. No question. And the third thing I would say is have a transparent conversation with yourself about what are your avoidance mechanisms in life. What are you doing to avoid reality? What are you doing? And to take a really hard, good, transparent look at that every day and face yourself. And if you need help, and we'll call this your fourth part of your question, go get help, from someone. It's so hard to see yourself. When you're the one in the frame, it's hard to see the picture. And if you need to go to a yoga class, a meditation class, if you need counseling or therapy, don't be afraid to reach out, because everyone needs help at some point in their life.
Yeah. And can you tell us how to learn more about your work and how to, get involved?
Well, we have classes live everywhere from Florida to Colorado to California. I mean, throughout the country. I show up live for retreats so you can see me in person. But we also have our classes online now. So you can watch, you can participate in classes that we do weekly, several classes a week. You can watch online. You can be part of retreats online. So you don't even have to be there. And then for counseling, you can simply reach out. You can use my email, my phone number. Whatever. If you have those things, you can give those, or if you'd like me to give, I'll be happy to share.
So the main website would be Mindfulness Meditation Centers.
For meditation, for the retreats, Mindfulness Meditation Centers. For me personally, you can just go to Michael at M as in Mary, B as in boy, S as in Sam, group.org. And, or you can call me either way, just, or text me 941-416-1890. And about 80% of the people I see are done remotely, just like we're doing now. Mm-hmm. So either by phone, by Skype, by FaceTime, by Zoom, all of that's just fine. So that's how we see most people these days. The whole idea of coming in for a counseling session and having to rush through traffic and hit those stoplights that we talked to, it's just none of it's unnecessary. It's just all unnecessary. So you can do this from your office. That includes the meditation time as well. So we have thousands, literally a library on that website, 15 years of these talks, thousands of audio talks, and maybe if it's right at about 1,000 videos now, and that's all available. So you can feel free to go on and check those things out. Some are free, some are by membership only.
Great. Well, thanks for your time, Michael, and I hope that this benefits everyone involved. And
thank you. And thanks. Yeah, thank you for allowing me to share. It is the biggest part of my life. It's really my reason for being, and so I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for having me.
Have a great day, Michael.
Likewise. Take care.